There you go. So the big four, so form, function, content, and context are the things that you're gonna need to know for every single artwork. However, you might know more about one thing and less about another, okay? Sorry, I hear construction outside my house. Hopefully it's not too distracting. So we're going to try to do our best to explain what these things are. And honestly, it's going to take you a few weeks to get the gist of it. So I did a lot of headings. So in the PowerPoints and slides, there's a lot of headings to help you out, okay? Is that noise distracting? Should I close my window? We're okay? Okay. Okay, so some basic information. Study guide. You got number 1, flip it over, right? So in study guide, you see number 1, look at the next page. This is the list that's on the screen, right? So these are what we used to use for our flashcard lists for inventory. This is your identification. These are things that you have to kind of like memorize about every single artwork. It's kind of a pain in the butt. This is my least favorite part about art history. But what I did for you is I made you guys lists so that you know what's going to be tested. And so I've grouped them. So we typically study artworks. You don't have to memorize the number, but we look at them in units. So we're going to typically quiz, like we'll take a quiz over like 2 of these chunks. So our first quiz is on prehistory and Pacific culture. So the first 2 lists that you see on the group, so that first arrow, right? We don't always study these things in order. And so number 1, 2, you look here, you can see it goes from 7, 8, and then skips 9. I included 9 in Pacific culture because it's from the Pacific Islands, okay? And then you'll see that Pacific Islands is 9, 11, and then it goes all the way to 213, right? So we're gonna kind of jump around. That's one of the reasons why I gave you the 2 sets of note takers, because some of these things are kind of out of order, okay? So we'll quiz over 2 chunks of these things typically. Normally this entire page is what we would study for a unit test. So I try to make it as easy for you to know what's going to be on the test so that it's all in one place, okay? So study guides, we just talked about this a little bit, so I don't want to do too much on this, but the study guides are basically broken into what your reading assignments are and some important links for you. Most of those links are hyperlinked into Canvas under the unit. So under unit 1, you're going to see a lot of these things already there. It's going to tell you what artworks are covered. You might notice, if you guys look at the screen here, 3-5, it says stepped pyramid of Dozier. We don't need to know that one. That's just one I'm using as a comparison. So we're going to see artwork that's not going to be tested on the AP exam, okay? But then you'll also see it says number 17, the pyramids and the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx. If it has a number like 17 or 213 or 250, that's the stuff that's on the AP exam. If it's in parentheses, that's the stuff that's in the textbook, or something that I thought additional that's not in your textbook, that's like so important that you need to like see this in order to understand art history, okay? And then in the study guide, I kind of organize it in all different kinds of ways to help you out. I've got some like key important vocabulary for you. Feel free to write your vocabulary here or in an additional notebook if you want to, or even in your note takers. I have some guided reading for you. I sometimes have things like fill in the blank. And typically I tell you where that information is. So here on number 8, it says it's in the book, and then it's actually in the introduction of the book. So it has a weird page number. So I normally always tell you what part of the reading it's in so that you can easily find it if you don't get it in like the lecture discussion of the day. So the only homework you really have to do is to, well, read as much as you can, but then do your note takers in class, right? So this is what I'm going to collect in order for you to take your quizzes, okay? So this is what I did different this year to make your life a little bit easier. So you can use it to take notes when we read, during class discussions, and then you're gonna show me proof that you did it in order to show that you got ready for the quiz, okay? This could be helpful for you if you wanted. It's not mandatory, but a lot of those Khan Academy essays, you could use this app called Read and Write from the Chrome store, and you can highlight important things, and it will take all that information you highlight and put it in a Google Doc. So it will save notes for you if that helps you, all right? So feel free to do that. You can also use a typical highlighter to highlight in your note takers important information that you want to make sure you memorize, right? So this is where it gets kind of busy. And so I'm going to try to not talk about everything that's on these slides, but I want to make sure that we have some basic information, okay? So if you look in your note taker, right, so let's go ahead and open up the orange one, right? It's got inside the cover, it's got a table of context, okay? So the table of context, you'll notice, does not have every single unit that we're learning. I broke it down into 2 sections. So we have content area 1, 2, 3, and then I go to 7, 8, and 9. More than likely, this will be what we cover first semester. Now, there are few pieces in Islamic culture that's in note takers too. I made the mistake and forgot to move it, so I apologize. So most of the first semester is only going to be in this orange note taker, and then there might be a few things that we move into the other, right? How to use your note takers is underneath it there. And then I have an example. And so the next page, the one that says 00, is from the Forbidden City in China. You can see this here. We're going to use this as an example. Feel free today to take any notes that you want to on this page in your note takers. So if you want to write some notes in these different sections so that you remember what these sections are for, feel free to go ahead and do that. I think I included a clean one of those in the second note taker too. So you'll have a clean version and a version that you've marked up, okay? So the first thing that we have to know is identification. So identification is going to be the center section right here. And then these different components here. These are things that sometimes we'll know a lot about, and sometimes we won't know a thing about it. So there might be times where some of these areas are blank, okay? And I will try to help you as we're doing the class so that we know when things are blank or what we don't know, okay? So identification is going to be these areas that I've highlighted in red, right? They're going to be things like the name of the artwork, the culture in which it comes from, where it's from, the art period, the time it was made, and what it's made out of, the media, okay? AP makes you, in order to identify something, it wants you to have at least 2 bits of information memorized, okay? So this is typically when you have an essay in AP, they'll make you identify an artwork as an example. You would need to know 2 bits of information to memorize. I want you to memorize at least 3. Does anyone know why I would want you to memorize at least 3? You can turn on your mute, unmute yourself if you have an educated guess. Why would I want you to memorize 3 and not 2?
It's better to have 3 that you know, so in case you get one wrong, you have the other 2 that's correct.
Exactly. You do not get counted against from wrong information, which is kind of a cool thing. Also, what if you, you have a momentary like lapse in memory and you forget one of them? You have a spare, okay? I'm gonna suggest to you, and this might be something that you mark in the identification on the note takers, on that sheet of the Forbidden City. I think the easiest things to memorize is the name of the artwork, the culture. The culture also could be the name of the artist. I forgot for some strange reason to put that on here too. For prehistory Pacific, I think we have like one name of an artist. So like memorizing names of artists, memorizing names of artwork, knowing the culture, and knowing the media is probably the easiest thing, right? Because you can look at it and go, oh, it's got terracotta tiles on the roof, or it's made out of limestone, or it's made out of oil paint. Like some of those things are going to become second nature for you. I would say that those are the easiest things to memorize. So the name of the artist and culture. I think the date is the hardest one to memorize. And in all honesty, I don't even have them memorized anymore, right? I could probably tell you that the Renaissance in Italy is from around 1500. It's for about 25 years. But do I know specifically when the Last Supper was painted? I don't anymore. I know it's around 1500. It's like 1490 something. Honestly, who cares? I think it's more important to know big ideas than specific little details like the date in which it was made, okay? So right down here at the very bottom, I have a link, and we'll watch one of these in a few minutes. Yesterday, AP Classroom released tutorial videos for teachers as well as for you guys. And what they do is they teach based on the major concepts. So identification is one of the skills that you need to learn. And so they actually will talk about an artwork, and they're going to talk about a bunch of different skills that you need to know, but they're going to focus on identification. So there's actually a link there that I made active to you that you can watch later if you so choose. I'm not going to make it mandatory right now, but if you're like, I really need help with identification, I don't quite understand what Mrs. Modest means, you can totally watch this video and you might get some additional clarification from somebody who is really used to works for AP and knows exactly what they're looking for, okay? The next thing is form, okay? So form is gonna be in two sections on your note taker. Form is gonna be what materials it was made out of and how it was created. So there's a lot of things included here. There's gonna be like elements and principles of art, which I know sometimes some of us haven't taken an art class in a while and they're like, I don't know what these things are exactly. But I will try to teach you what these things mean. They're going to be things like how it was organized. It's going to be like what it visually looks like, but not really about meaning, right? It's going to be more like technical sort of stuff. However, all of these things, the form, function, content, context, are all intermingled, right? They're all related to each other. So if you look in my formal elements there, in this little description, I have content and form in that box because they're so related. You have something that's like physical and it means something. And so I'm trying to tie it and make connections for you for things, okay? I had a video. Okay, we're gonna watch this video. Now, this video that we're gonna watch from AP is relates to something we're going to talk about tomorrow, which is kind of cool. So you get a little bit of a glimpse on one of the pieces that we're going to talk about tomorrow. We won't always watch videos in class, but I thought today would be a good one to share this so that you can see this new resource for you, because literally it came out yesterday. So I didn't even have time to preview everything. Uh-oh. Oh, maybe. One more time. Thank you. It's just because I said one more time, right?
Like in real life.
Oh, let's go to the
So if
beginning.
I saw this stuff, we're going to cover topic 1.2 today in our first daily video for this topic, dealing with materials, processes, and techniques in prehistoric art. And so as we begin to work our way through the image set, we develop more and more skills and more important things that we have to look at as we work through.
Can you guys hear okay?
So what are we going to learn today? Well, we're going to start with skill 1.B with this topic. And we're also going to be looking at anthropomorphic stelae. So what do we need to do in 1.B? Well, we've got to describe visual elements of a work of art. So what does that mean? We need to take a close look at form, the style, if we can ascertain what that is, and attribute it to a specific style like Impressionism or Art Deco, or just basically kind of stylistic qualities.
Sorry.
The materials, what's being used, techniques they're using to create the work, the content, what are we looking at, what's it about, is there a story or a narrative here we need to be addressing? And so we have a couple kind of guiding questions on the right that we'll look at. And the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is always start with what you're given. So in the CED, you're given some information. The identifying information is over here on the left side. This is the anthropomorphic stelae from Unit 1, found in the Arabian Peninsula, 4th millennium BCE, and sandstone. So one of our questions when we're describing the visual elements of a work is, what's it made of? Well, we're given that right there in the identifier, a sandstone. This is what we call an anthropomorphic stele or stele or stele. How you pronounce it is just kind of, I think, might be even regional to where you live in the world. I call it a stele. So this is a vertical stone monument. You've got a couple of these in the image set. You're going to see the stele of Hammurabi in Unit 2. You're also going to see a grave stele from Greece in Unit 2. So basically, it's a vertical stone with some sort of carving on it, relief carving. It may have some sort of text inscription. Getting back to what we need to do with our visual elements description, what does it look like? Well, it's something called anthropomorphic. We also get that from the title, which is a term that means an abstracted human form. It's human-like. And where do we see that? Well, let's take a closer look. We have some facial features here, and eyes, a pair of eyes, a nose. We see he's wearing a belt with this double-bladed dagger. So these are all things that indicate we're dealing with a human form, even if it's not a fully representational form.
So this is mostly form and content.
How was it made? Another one of our guiding questions. Well, this is a relief carving. So our design is raised up from the surface of the stone. What's it about? We don't specifically know, but we can, based on what we can see, describe what we're seeing. So it's an upright male figure, believed to probably be used as some sort of grave marker, maybe in an open air sanctuary. It's also very abstracted, meaning that we see some human features, but they don't look like what we expect them to look like in real life. So if I saw this stele walking down the street, I would be maybe caught a little off guard because it doesn't look like a human form exactly. It's very minimal in its rendering. Notice it doesn't have a mouth that we can see in this image. Maybe that was painted on. If there are traces of pigment, maybe it was not intended to have a mouth, or maybe it had something actually applied.
It's very smooth.
Unclear. But we get the sense of a human form regardless. Now, other things that are important to know about the stele is that it was not the only one found in this region. We have this other form here, again, this kind of abstracted human form, a vertical monument, relief carving.
Sorry.
This one actually maybe a little more developed as far as what we see. So we have a very limited rendering of a face in the one from the image set on the left, but on the right, it seems to be a little more developed with ears and a nose and mouth, even a brow ridge, which is interesting. We also have some fully developed renderings of the arms that end in these kind of fingers, which we don't get in the work from the image set. So as we describe, we're looking. right? We're going past just identifying it with what's given in the CED and actually taking a minute, slowing down and looking at the images. And in a world where we're constantly clicking and swiping, it can be hard to slow down and do that. But take a minute and look and see what you have, and this will help you develop better responses for your multiple choice and free response questions on the exam. So what do we take away? That you're going to need to be able to not only identify works of art, but describe them. And that's a little bit more sophisticated skill than that kind of intro level describe. Basically, tell us what we've given you in the CED is identifying information. You're going to start there, though, with that identifying information, because that's going to help you get some kind of idea about materials. Looking really closely at the image itself will be what you need to do this descriptive task. Any aspect of the visual analysis that you're going to do, or this description, so the form, the style, the materials, techniques, the content, any of those are fodder for the AP exam. They could come at you in a multiple choice question, or it could be part of a free response question that you need to develop further. Yet again, keep kind of landing here at the end with this, but I want you to really understand we don't know a lot about these global prehistory works because of this lack of records or lack of records that we can understand. We know a lot of them are believed to have very important ritual or spiritual purposes because, again, they were taken, or these early cultures took the time to create them, and they were quite busy trying to just survive. So to take the time out to make these works meant something. Finally, materials. When we look at these sandstone steles, again, they're working with what's in the region, but some of these do show evidence of other materials from outside this Saudi Arabian peninsula region, which means that we know that there was maybe some contact with other cultures and materials were transported and traded from other locations. So these are kind of things that we have to think about as we look at works of art as well, is what's native to the region and what materials or techniques did they get from contact outside of the region. So that's it for our first video of 1.2, and I look forward to seeing you in other videos in this.
Okay, so I accidentally hit the wrong window. I apologize. We won't always watch those in class, but it's nice to know that they exist for you guys so that you can get kind of a further explanation of the material. Especially if you decide that you want to take the AP exam, it's there for you guys. You guys disappeared, so let me check and make sure we're okay. Okay, I was a little worried. So she talked a lot more than just about form in that discussion. And they're going to do that in all of their review. There's actually 2 instructors right now, and they're going to highlight like one area of focus, and they're going to do it through an artwork. And they're going to talk about the content, the form, the context as well, but they're going to try to highlight some of these key elements of the AP exam that you need to know, okay? So let's practice a little bit here. Do you guys mind? I've done a lot of talking, so I want to see if you can get some of this. So form is going to be some like technical information about here. So I try to pick something that you guys already know something about. Does anyone know what the pyramids and the Sphinx are made out of? You can turn on your audio. Anyone know what they're made out of? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller? Where are the Sphinx from?
Ancient Egypt.
Ancient Egypt. And so we're along the Nile, right? And so there's going to be this delta area, and then there's going to be this kind of dry, arid area as well. And there's a lot of stone, right? So, you know, some of the identification information is going to tell you some of this as well. So it's carved and made out of stone, right? It's made out of limestone. And then let's just focus on the Sphinx and not the Great Pyramid behind it. When you look at the Sphinx, what seems to be emphasized? What stands out the most, especially in this angle here?
The paws.
The paws do, right? So that's not just, that's kind of a content issue as well as a form issue. So it's where the emphasis is. The emphasis is kind of the form part of this. So it helps us understand the content. A Sphinx is part lion. What could a lion represent? What could a lion represent?
Power.
Power. And so these things are going to be all kind of tied together. So in your note taker, right? So like in your note taker, if we're on the Egypt section, so this is, let's see, I'm going to open it up here. This is number 17, right? Number 17 in here. It's going to be in this formal area here that you're going to be able to talk about the content and the form. So like, what do you see and how is it organized in order for you to understand? Another important thing to understand here on organization is that this Sphinx is located right in front of this pharaoh's pyramid, okay? So those are some of the things that you can see that are visually present. These are gonna be like those visual clues that are pretty easy to understand, okay? The content, you can come in. Sorry, my husband is coming in. We're both teaching from home today. So the content is going to be things like, what does it mean? What does it express? So we were just talking about how it expresses power, right? That's going to be something that's content based. It also is interconnected with its function and who it was made for. And so sometimes those things are visually there. So, who was this made for? What is it an image of? Let's just focus on the Sphinx. What is it an image of?
A pharaoh.
A pharaoh in the form of a lion, which we already talked about, right? Those are things that we can visually see. And then what does that mean? It means power. And it's placed in front of his pyramid. So this is the content. This is your like understanding of it. Okay. The context is probably, honestly, I think the easiest thing to understand. The context is going to be the history, right? It's going to be where it is in history, how it relates to the people who made it, who it was made for, right? So this is going to be these two red sections that you see here. Who's the audience? Who's the patron? You know, when was it made? And those kind of things that are connected to it. So with our Sphinx, what would be the context of it? Anyone know what time of history it was made? It was made in the Old Kingdom of the ancient Egypts, or of ancient Egyptian period, right? And it could relate to where it's placed. And I already mentioned, I mentioned too much, that it's by the Nile, right? Does anyone know where it's located in relationship to the Nile? It's on the opposite side of the river. So it's on the side of the river in which the sun sets, right? And that relates to its function. So the function is going to be the why. Why was it made? Oh, I got the wrong slide up here. Oh my goodness, I didn't fix the red. It's this part. You guys see here? Function is going to be this part that I circle here. I apologize. Okay, so that's going to be why it was made, who the audience was. It's going to relate to time, location, culture. It can be spiritual. It can be political. It can be personal expression. It can relate to society. It could relate to government. You know, it's going to be those reasons for why it was made. Is it for decoration? Is it part of communication or commemoration? So what's the function of this? What's the function of the Sphinx? Don't make me call on someone. What's the function of it? What's the pyramid for?
The pharaoh's burial place.
Right, it's for the pharaoh's burial place. So, right, so the patron's going to be the pharaoh. He had this built in his own lifetime. So that's part of like the context relationship to the function, right? It's placed in front of his, like the Sphinx is placed in front of his tomb, right? And so that's going to express that symbol of what?
Power.
Exactly, power. Very, very good. So that's going to be kind of the keys, and we're going to reiterate this stuff over and over again. Okay, so the next few slides I'm going to zip through because honestly, I just want to, it's a nice to know, but it's a little overwhelming and too much to know. Right now, all those AP classroom videos that they're producing are all related to the big ideas, like the skills that you need to know for art history. And so all of those skills, but one is based on the note taker. So your note takers are going to help you. So things like skill one is visual analysis. That's going to be your identification, your form, and your content. So that's your understanding of how the artwork was kind of put together. The next one is contextual. This is going to be related to the history, the location, and explain some of the information about like the function of it. So this is kind of like the why. The one is like the how, the two is like the why. And then skill three is going to be comparison of artworks. So we're going to be able to compare artworks that are either in the same period or compare artworks that are not in the 250. Artistic traditions. We're going to be looking at how art relates to the time period in which it was made and how it relates to its culture, because there's a lot of stylistic considerations and things that we see over and over and over. Like ancient Egypt is like the perfect example. There's a style there that lasted for like 2,000 years. Like you can always tell if something's Egyptian because it all looks the same. Visual analysis of an unknown work. They are going to show you something, and then they're going to go, based on what you know about a piece in the 250, what do you know about this? And so they're going to have you understand. And to tell you the truth, this is the big deal for me, right? When you go into a museum or you go somewhere in the world and you go to see something historical or a piece of art, I want you to feel like you already know something about it because you know so much about all these other things. So when you see something in the Art Institute of Chicago, you can look at it and go, I think that's Art Nouveau because we studied Klimt and I know X, Y, and Z. Then you have to do an attribution of an unknown work. So that would be, I show you a Klimt that's not the Kiss, and you tell me that it's Klimt because it's similar to the Kiss by X, Y, and Z. Art historical interpretation. So you have to understand what it means based on the visual evidence. And then the last one, number 8, is the only one that's not really covered in your note takers. And that's basically your justification. So you would see a piece of work and you would justify it based on things you already know. So this is kind of like a synthesis of everything you know about art history. So that's kind of a big one, okay?